Marjorie Merriweather Post lived a life of unparalleled opulence, surrounded by beauty, power, and history. The daughter of legendary businessman C.W. Post, she inherited his vast business empire, revolutionizing home goods and becoming one of the richest women in America. Her legendary jewelry collection, featuring Russian imperial gems, Marie Antoinette's earrings, and Fabergé treasures, was rivaled only by the grandeur of her homes. Hillwood, now a world-renowned museum, stands as a testament to her passion for art and history, while Mar-a-Lago, her gilded Palm Beach estate, remains in the spotlight today as the private club of President Donald Trump. Yet, while her name is often associated with luxury and excess, Marjorie Merriweather Post was far more than a wealthy heiress or a collector of fine things. Beyond the dazzling jewels and opulent mansions, she was a formidable diplomat, a woman who moved effortlessly among presidents, princes, and world leaders. From hosting Washington's political elite to shaping U.S.-Soviet relations during World War II, she wielded influence with intelligence and grace. Her connections spanned from the White House to European palaces, making her an unofficial stateswoman at a time when women were rarely seen in such roles. But behind the glittering facade lay a woman who was all too human. Married and divorced 4 times, she endured betrayal and heartbreak, proving the age-old adage that money cannot buy happiness. Yet, despite her personal struggles, she remained steadfast in her commitment to philanthropy, leaving behind a legacy of beauty, generosity, and grace. Join us as we explore the remarkable life of Marjorie Merriweather Post, a woman of wealth, influence, and resilience, whose impact continues to be felt long after her time. Marjorie Merriweather Post was born on March 15, 1887, in Springfield, Illinois, to C.W. Post and Ella Letitia Merriweather. In 1891, the family moved to Battle Creek, Michigan, where C.W. sought treatment for neurasthenia at Dr. John Harvey Kellogg's sanitarium. When traditional methods failed, a Christian Science healer, Elizabeth Gregory, miraculously restored his health, solidifying the family's belief in spiritual healing, a conviction they maintained even when Marjorie fell ill. A mechanically gifted but financially unstable entrepreneur, C.W. pursued health-focused products after being dismissed by Kellogg. Using Ella's inheritance, he founded La Vida Inn in 1892, blending Christian Science with nutrition and positive thinking. While Ella valued privacy, Marjorie enjoyed the rural setting, cherishing her first private bedroom. To fund the retreat, C.W. revived his old invention, scientific suspenders, creating a successful mail-order business. La Vida Inn attracted patients seeking gentler treatments, and C.W. studied psychology under Charcot in Paris before abandoning hypnotism over safety concerns. At home, he emphasized mental discipline, once making Marjorie endure dental work without anesthesia to build resilience. In 1895, after 18 months of development, C.W. created Postum, a caffeine-free coffee substitute. His innovative marketing, including the slogan, "There's a Reason," turned Postum into a household staple, securing the family's wealth. Despite their rising fortune, Marjorie's childhood remained simple. She sewed doll clothes, caught fireflies, and walked to school in the snow. She also spent time at the Postum factory, playing in wheat bins and helping with labeling, fostering a strong work ethic. C.W. encouraged self-reliance, teaching her to trap and tan moles for doll coats. C.W. further toughened her, teaching her to box after boys teased her. She earned their respect by knocking down a bully. Fiercely protective, he even intervened in school disputes. By age 9, Marjorie accompanied him on business trips, gaining first-hand exposure to industry, machinery, and worker conditions, early experiences that shaped her future as a business leader. Though progressive in his ambitions for Marjorie, C.W. was often awkward in parenting. He disguised her as a boy to take her to a prize fight and once relied on a stranger to braid her hair on a train. Yet rather than wishing for a son, Marjorie believed he simply wanted her by his side. He further prepared her for leadership by having her sit in on Postum Cereal Company meetings, an unconventional but invaluable education for a girl in a male-dominated world. By 1898, the Postum Cereal Company thrived, thanks to CW's innovative marketing. He launched national ads and even invented a fake rival, Monk's Brew, to outmaneuver competition. To boost year-round sales, he introduced grape nuts, branding it as a scientific health food. Using Marjorie's childhood image in ads, both products became household staples. As CW's wealth grew, his marriage with Ella crumbled. Marjorie often traveled with him, including a pivotal 1899 trip to Fort Worth for business expansion. A stop in Florida sparked her lifelong love for the state, later inspiring Mar-a-Lago. Determined to shape her into high society, CW ordered designer dresses from Chicago and New York. In 1898, the family moved into an elegant home, marking their transition into the elite. Marjorie befriended Norma Eldred, spent summers at Gull Lake, and, despite luxury, remained disciplined under her father's guidance. With Ella frequently away for health reasons, Marjorie, at 13, became the unofficial mistress of the house, cherishing time alone with her father. By 1901, Postum was generating over $1 million annually. CW expanded aggressively, pioneering direct-to-consumer advertising and transforming Battle Creek into Cereal City, USA. His success fueled restlessness, and he enrolled 14-year-old Marjorie at Mount Vernon Seminary in Washington, D.C., refining her poise and education. By 15, she entered high society, attending elite dances and attracting prominent suitors. Embodying the Gibson girl ideal, she captivated many, but CW remained fiercely protective, demanding full transparency in her romantic encounters. In 1902, CW planned the Boulders, a grand Greenwich estate with separate wings for himself and Marjorie's future family. He also waged political battles, advocating for a post-check currency system, but faced resistance from financial institutions. Seeking an escape from family tensions, he took Marjorie on a stagecoach tour of England, where they attended Edward VII's coronation. Back home, he strengthened his anti-union stance, ensuring workers were well paid to prevent labor unrest. By 1903, 16-year-old Marjorie attracted wealthy suitors, including Edward Bennett Close, a Greenwich law student who proposed within days of meeting her. Though she adored him, CW insisted she wait 2 years, wary of a mismatched marriage. He also disapproved of her extravagant fashion sense, though she later became one of the world's best-dressed women. In October 1904, CW and Ella finalized their divorce. Shortly before, CW stunned Marjorie by announcing his engagement to Layla Young, his much younger secretary and her former governess. Feeling betrayed, Marjorie suspected Layla had schemed to seduce CW. The stress took a toll. She claimed her hair turned white and she developed boils. Determined to assert independence, Marjorie announced her engagement to Ed Close in July 1905. At 18, she saw no reason to wait. Ed had graduated from Columbia Law, and she was overseeing the Boulders' construction. Though CW approved, he cautioned her about marriage risks. On August 31st, Ed bought her an extravagant Tiffany ring, though whispers about her Midwestern roots lingered in his old money circles. His brother, Harry Close, was so enamored with her that he reportedly fled to Alaska to mend his broken heart. In September 1905, Ed formally proposed, and CW hosted an elegant engagement party, but tensions flared. Ella refused to attend if Layla was present, while CW insisted on her inclusion. After negotiations, both parents agreed to be civil. On the eve of the wedding, Marjorie overheard Ed's relatives mocking her Midwestern background. Furious, she vowed, "I'll show those SOBs if it takes me 60 years." On December 5th, 1905, CW gave Marjorie away in an intimate Manhattan ceremony, gifting her a $100,000 bond, the deed to the Boulders, and a heartfelt letter. To Ed, he simply wrote, "Be tender and kind to my little girl." National newspapers praised Marjorie's beauty and wealth. However, tensions arose on their honeymoon when Ed demanded she abandon Christian Science for his Episcopalian faith, a conflict that persisted throughout their marriage. In 1906, CW took Ed on a grueling Texas trip to prepare him for leadership, but Ed struggled with the frontier lifestyle. Meanwhile, CW secured 213,000 acres, establishing Post, Texas, with modern infrastructure and farmland for settlers. Back in Greenwich, 18-year-old Marjorie, overwhelmed by managing the boulders, lost 25 pounds under CW's strict financial oversight, learning a lifelong commitment to precision. By 1907, Ed lost interest in law, so CW offered him a role at Postum. They moved to Battle Creek, where Marjorie refined her hostess skills, once cleverly saving a Thanksgiving dinner disaster with quick thinking. However, Ed lacked the ambition CW wanted in a successor. Meanwhile, Kellogg's Corn Flakes rose in popularity, and Post faced legal troubles over advertising claims. A $750,000 libel battle with Collier's magazine, though won in 1913, damaged his reputation. In 1908, Marjorie gave birth to her first daughter, Adelaide, with an emotional CW at her side. Her second daughter, Eleanor, was born in 1909, but when the baby developed pneumonia, Ed was absent, leaving Marjorie to rely on her father for reassurance. Raised in a household that shunned alcohol, she was appalled by Ed's drinking, refusing to tolerate excessive behavior, a stance she maintained throughout her life. Marjorie and Ed's differences grew. What once seemed like an exciting contrast between old and new money became a source of resentment. He disliked her extravagant socializing, and she resented his detachment from their daughters. By 1911, she found purpose in philanthropy, raising funds for the elderly and historic preservation. Feeling stifled by Greenwich's rigid social scene, she sought escape in Manhattan and Palm Beach, where she envisioned building a grand estate to create her own elite circle. Between 1912 and 1914, tragedy struck. In October 1912, Marjorie's mother, Ella, died suddenly, and she believed heartbreak from CW's abandonment was the cause. Less than 2 years later, on May 9, 1914, CW himself died, not from natural causes, but suicide. Convinced he had stomach cancer despite a successful surgery, he grew paranoid and in his Santa Barbara home wrote a farewell letter, dressed in his finest clothes, lay down, and shot himself. The nation was stunned. His funeral in Battle Creek shut down the city, with grief later compared to the mourning for President Kennedy. At just 27, Marjorie inherited the Postum Cereal Company, stepping into a role far greater than that of an heiress. Following her father's death, Marjorie faced a legal battle over his $22 million estate, particularly the division of Postum stock between her and Layla. Outraged, she contested the will, arguing the stock rightfully belonged to her under an agreement with her mother. With Ed's quiet assistance, she found documentation proving her claim. After months of negotiation, Layla accepted a $6 million settlement in December 1915, avoiding litigation. Now the sole heir to Postum, Marjorie stepped into an unprecedented role as a female business leader. Unable to serve on the company board, she had Ed take a seat on her behalf, though he lacked leadership skills. Instead, CW's trusted executives, led by Uncle Cal, maintained stability while keeping Marjorie involved. She and Ed relocated to Manhattan, officially to oversee Postum's East Coast operations, but in reality, to integrate into high society. Though Ed held a board seat, Marjorie made the real decisions, gradually asserting her independence. By 1915, she fully embraced city life, purchasing a townhouse in Carnegie Hill among the Astors and Guggenheims. World War I disrupted Postum's operations as the government seized wheat supplies, prompting the company to pivot into livestock feed and oils. Then, in May 1917, the boulders caught fire while Marjorie and Ed were at a country club dance. With CW's wing destroyed, she saw it as a sign. Her future was in New York. She sold the estate, expanded her Carnegie Hill home, and refined her taste in art, collecting European masterpieces under the guidance of British dealer Joseph Devane. Ed dismissed her acquisitions as ostentation, but Marjorie was evolving into a confident, independent woman. In 1917, she joined the New York State Woman Suffrage Party, advocating for voting rights in a delegation to President Wilson. When the U.S. entered World War I, she shifted her focus to philanthropy, initially sewing bandages for the Red Cross before funding an army hospital in France with a $75,000 donation. When her first shipment of supplies sank, she personally financed a second, ensuring its success. the hospital became the largest Red Cross facility in wartime Europe, earning her the Legion of Honor decades later. With Ed stationed overseas, Marjorie embraced full independence, managing Postum, volunteering, studying art at the Met, and raising their daughters, Adelaide and Eleanor. She exposed them to culture while adopting modern parenting techniques, fostering their love for animals. By war's end, she had outgrown her marriage. The independence she gained during Ed's absence made their differences irreconcilable. She filed for divorce, leaving Ed heartbroken. He quickly remarried and fathered twin sons, one of whom later became the father of actress Glenn Close. In 1917, Marjorie met stockbroker EF Hutton at a Long Island party, but by 1919, circumstances had changed. He was now a widower, and their attraction was immediate. A self-made man who had risen from poverty to Wall Street dominance, Hutton's ambition and risk-taking reminded her of her father. They married on July 7, 1920, in an intimate ceremony at her Manhattan townhouse, forming a powerful financial and social partnership. Though her daughter struggled with the remarriage, they bonded with their new stepbrother, Halcourt Hutton. Tragedy soon struck when Halcourt died in a horseback riding accident, devastating EF and leaving Marjorie silently vowing to give him a son. Turning back to business, Marjorie recognized the need to modernize Postum. By 1919, she saw Uncle Cal's management as outdated and recruited Colby Chester as assistant treasurer. His efficiency led him to the presidency, proving her instincts correct. No longer just an heiress, she was actively shaping one of America's largest food companies. With Postum thriving, Marjorie encouraged Hutton to bring his financial expertise to the company. In 1922, he took it public, securing a $10 million deal with Goldman Sachs. By 1923, he became chairman, moving headquarters to Manhattan and stepping away from his brokerage firm to focus on Postum's expansion. Their business partnership reflected their marriage, an alliance of power, ambition, and wealth. Despite their fortune, New York's old money elite viewed them as outsiders. While Hutton gained club memberships, Marjorie's divorce from Ed Close kept her from the most exclusive circles. Unbothered, they embraced the rising elite, forming connections with celebrities and business leaders. In Palm Beach, where wealth dictated status, Marjorie saw opportunity. She built Hogarcito, a Spanish-style retreat, and established herself as a leading philanthropist by organizing the first Palm Beach Hospital Ball, raising $110,000 for Good Samaritan Hospital. Marjorie transformed into a glamorous socialite while maintaining her business acumen, philanthropy, and devotion to family. She and Hutton led a lavish life, acquiring multiple estates, including Hillwood on Long Island and Topbridge, a grand Adirondack retreat with 18 guest cottages. More than an escape, Topbridge provided year-round employment for locals. Guests, from Madame Nehru to General McAuliffe, marveled at its mix of Native American artifacts and European luxury. Despite the glamour, she endured heartbreak, suffering a miscarriage before giving birth to their daughter, Nedaniah, Deanie Hutton. In 1924, she sold her Manhattan townhouse, tired of city congestion, and commissioned a 54-room triplex atop a high-rise. The grand residence, adorned with Gainsborough paintings and Boucher tapestries, reflected her growing confidence and independence. As Postum expanded, the couple moved between Palm Beach, Long Island, Manhattan, and the Adirondacks. In 1925, Postum's headquarters relocated from Battle Creek to Manhattan, angering Michigan employees and distancing Marjorie from her stepmother, Layla, who had become a civic leader in Battle Creek. Dismissing local contribution requests, Marjorie famously quipped, "Let Layla do it." She avoided the town for years, only reclaiming her father's belongings after Layla's death in 1940. Postum evolved from a cereal competitor to a food empire, acquiring Jell-O, Swan's Down cake flour, Minute tapioca, Baker's chocolate, Log Cabin syrup, Hellman's mayonnaise, and Sanka coffee. By 1928, revenue soared to $56.5 million after acquiring Maxwell House Coffee, ironically, a product her father opposed. As Postum thrived, Hutton indulged in yachting, commissioning Hussar IV, a 300-foot schooner. On a voyage to Gloucester, Massachusetts, they met scientist Clarence Birdseye, who had developed a quick freezing method for preserving food. While frozen foods had a poor reputation, Birdseye's technology preserved taste and texture. Recognizing its potential, Marjorie urged Hutton to invest, predicting frozen foods would revolutionize American kitchens. Skeptical, Hutton doubted consumer demand and the readiness of grocery stores to adopt refrigeration, while Birdseye struggled with distribution challenges. By 1929, Birdseye's company became profitable, prompting Postum's $22 million acquisition, far more than an earlier investment would have cost. That July, Postum rebranded as General Foods Corporation, fulfilling Marjorie's vision of a food empire. As the 1920s roared, Marjorie and EF became Palm Beach icons, hosting extravagant parties alongside Hollywood and Broadway elites like Flo Ziegfeld and Billy Burke. Embracing theatricality, Marjorie made grand entrances, once descending a golden staircase at a Persian-themed ball. Their yacht, Hussar IV, became a floating stage for lavish adventures, with Ziegfeld's pranks adding to the spectacle. Yet wealth came with risks. Ziegfeld's reckless spending led to financial troubles, and EF lost $50,000 gambling. When he did it again, Marjorie retaliated by purchasing a $100,000 strand of pearls, forcing him to curb his habits. Beyond the social scene, Marjorie shaped Palm Beach's infrastructure. Frustrated by the Breakers Hotel's service, she introduced elevated beachside dining. When EF and friends were denied access to an elite golf club, they founded Seminole Golf Club for Palm Beach's rising elite. In 1925, when the Breakers caught fire, she and EF sprang into action, ensuring guests' safety and rescuing vital documents. Their leadership made headlines, cementing their influence. By the mid-1920s, Marjorie sought a grander estate. Personally scouting Palm Beach, she discovered a breathtaking 17-acre oceanfront property, which would become Mar-a-Lago. Initially hiring Marion Wyeth, she later brought in Viennese architect Joseph Urban for a theatrical Hispano-Moresque design. Urban's lavish vision, gold fixtures, intricate reliefs, and antique Spanish tiles soared over budget. Frustrated by his impracticality, she reinstated Wyeth to oversee the structural work. The result was a masterpiece. A pink stucco mansion blending Hispano-Moresque, Venetian, and Gothic influences, featuring 36,000 antique tiles, a grand 34-foot-high living room with Venetian silk tapestries, and the largest plate glass window in North America, framing ocean views. Marjorie added personal touches, from themed suites to a Sleeping Beauty-themed nursery for Deanie. Completed in 1927 at $2.5 million, Mar-a-Lago strained her marriage. EF fumed over costs, but she justified it as a moral duty, keeping 600 workers employed during Florida's downturn. Had we stopped, she later said, this would have added more unemployed. Hence, we went ahead. Upon its unveiling, Mar-a-Lago was hailed as a masterpiece, featured in Vogue, Town & Country, and Condé Nast. Its underground tunnel to the Bath and Tennis Club was an architectural innovation. Yet, despite its acclaim, the estate symbolized tension in Marjorie's marriage. She resented selling Postum stock to fund it, while EF mockingly called it their little cottage by the sea. By the late 1920s, Marjorie's priorities evolved. Turning 40 in 1927 and grieving the 1925 loss of her beloved Aunt Molly, she deepened her philanthropic efforts. Beyond grand gestures, she quietly supported Bethesda by the Sea Church, opened Mar-a-Lago to underprivileged children, and funded distant relatives and aspiring professionals. She financed her cousin's macadamia nut farm in Hawaii and the theological education of Reverend Julius Sibley. Among her most tragic beneficiaries was Barbara Hutton, the Woolworth heiress and daughter of EF's brother. Despite inheriting immense wealth, Barbara suffered from neglect and idolized Marjorie as a symbol of sophistication and stability. Marjorie tried to guide her, but Barbara remained adrift, unable to find direction despite her fortune. Marjorie also struggled with her eldest daughter, Adelaide, who rejected glamour in favor of a quiet country life. Strong-willed like her father, Adelaide clashed with her mother. Forced into Mount Vernon Seminary, she begged to return home, only agreeing to a compromise at Nightingale Bamford Day School. Later, she resisted a royal debut, settling for a modest New York introduction. In contrast, Eleanor's debut at the Ritz-Carlton dazzled, followed by a royal presentation before King George V and Queen Mary in 1928. Marjorie had long dreamed of this moment and commissioned an exquisite turquoise gown, but EF, weary of her social ambitions, forbade her from attending. She finally secured her own Buckingham Palace invitation in June 1929, curtsying before the King and Queen, a long-awaited triumph cementing her status among Europe's elite. Just months later, the stock market crashed. Devastated by widespread poverty and financial ruin, Marjorie shifted from lavish entertaining to philanthropy. She used her insurance savings to establish the Marjorie Post Hutton canteen, feeding unemployed women and children, while EF opened a food station for men. By 1930, she led the Salvation Army Women's Emergency Aid Committee, raising $50,000 to provide dignified meals away from chaotic breadlines. For 5 years, her canteen provided meals, celebrations, and even fashion shows for young girls in need. She led charity balls, raised funds for the Judson Health Center, and personally solicited donations, even in pouring rain. Her dedication earned her the Cross of Honor from First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt in 1932, placing her among honorees like Calvin Coolidge and Amelia Earhart. As the Great Depression unfolded, Marjorie distanced herself from the excesses of wealth, but her niece, Barbara Hutton, did the opposite, flaunting her fortune and earning the title, the richest girl in the world. Marjorie, disapproving of reckless spending, particularly opposed Barbara's 1933 marriage to Prince Alexis Midavani, whom she suspected was a fortune hunter. The press's obsession with wealth heightened Marjorie's fears for her youngest daughter, Nedanaya, nicknamed Dina. After the 1932 Lindbergh kidnapping, she imposed strict security, barring windows, hiring guards, and enforcing restrictions until Dina turned 18. Despite her efforts to protect her family, scandal found them. Eleanor eloped with playwright Preston Sturgis in 1930, defying Marjorie's wishes. Furious, EF mocked Sturgis's earnings as pin money compared to Eleanor's fortune. Though Marjorie disinherited her, Eleanor flaunted her independence, arriving at dinner in a Rolls-Royce only to eat at an automat, joking, "This is all I can afford now." As the Depression deepened, her marriage to EF Hutton unraveled. They clashed over politics. Marjorie supported FDR's New Deal, while EF believed the wealthy could yacht the country out of the Depression. More troubling, she suspected infidelity. Once bound by ambition and love, their partnership crumbled under betrayal and diverging values. Despite public appearances, hosting royalty and dignitaries aboard their yacht, EF's rumored affairs widened the rift. Marjorie, unwilling to tolerate unfaithfulness, saw echoes of her parents' failed marriage. Her pain surfaced in humor, once gifting EF a photo inscribed, "To Ed, your favorite wife at the moment." Determined to confirm her suspicions, Marjorie set traps: silken threads across doorways, talcum powder on floors, bells rigged to beds. When she caught EF in the act, she knew their marriage was over. In spring 1935, just before a planned European trip, she left without him, confronting him at the pier with evidence and announcing their divorce. Handled discreetly, the proceedings concluded on September 7, 1935, with Marjorie granted a divorce on grounds of adultery. EF denied the accusations, but testimony from household staff sealed his fate. Months later, he married Dorothy Metzger, whom he had first met through Marjorie's daughter, Adelaide. Beyond personal betrayal, their split had financial and political consequences. EF, a vocal critic of FDR's policies, urged corporations to gang up against government regulations, sparking national controversy. By December 1935, General Foods forced his resignation. Marjorie secured full custody of Dina, limiting EF's visits to rare holidays. Dina longed for a closer bond, but in his will, he left her only $25,000, while most of his fortune went to his second wife and stepdaughter. Though deeply wounded, Marjorie refused to dwell on heartbreak. She turned to philanthropy, Christian Science, and her daughters, though their own marriages faltered. Adelaide's husband mismanaged her fortune, and Eleanor's unions ended quickly, validating Marjorie's early warnings. In February 1935, Marjorie met Joseph E. Davies, a prominent Washington attorney and Roosevelt insider, at a Palm Beach dinner party. At 58, he exuded intelligence, charm, and authority, qualities that captivated her. She later told her daughter she had unexpectedly found a wonderful thing so late in life. Their connection was undeniable, but both were still married, Marjorie to E.F. and Davies to Washington socialite Emlyn Knight Davies. As their love deepened, Marjorie worried about the impact on her divorce, but Davies reassured her. By May 1935, they planned to leave their spouses. In June, Davies ended his 33-year marriage, devastating his wife and daughter. On December 15, 1935, Marjorie and Joe married in a grand ceremony at her Manhattan triplex, adorned with pink velvet, a spun sugar temple of love cake, and 1,000 pink chrysanthemums. Though some whispered she had bought her husband, Davies' daughter defended the marriage, insisting he had simply fallen in love. They honeymooned aboard Marjorie's yacht Sea Cloud, formerly Hussar 5, cruising the West Indies with Dina and elite guests. Marjorie's transition from socialite to business leader was complete in April 1936 when she secured a seat on the General Foods Board, becoming its first female director. With E.F. Hutton out of the picture, she fully controlled her business interests, fulfilling her father's belief in her potential. A major political donor, she backed FDR's 1936 re-election campaign, which paid off when Davies was appointed U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union. Hoping for a European post, Marjorie was horrified by the Moscow assignment, joking, "It's been awfully nice knowing you. Have a good time in Russia." But after meeting former Ambassador William Bullitt, she embraced the challenge, determined to make her mark. Arriving in Moscow in January 1937, Marjorie brought American luxury to the Soviet capital. She transformed Spaso House into a diplomatic hub, filling it with art, tapestries, and modern conveniences like freezers and multiple bathtubs, luxuries that bewildered the Russians. Her shipments of American food, including 2,000 pints of frozen cream, drew U.S. press criticism as excessive in a starving nation. Marjorie defended it as essential nutrition, though rumors swirled that she had imported cold cream for her face. In January 1937, Joe Davies was introduced as U.S. ambassador to Soviet President Mikhail Kalinin, immersing himself and Marjorie in Stalin's tightly controlled regime. They witnessed the USSR's Constitutional Convention and the brutality of the Great Purge. At night, they heard prisoners' screams, and dinner guests often vanished, liquidated by the state. Life at Spaso House was under constant surveillance. Secret police occupied the attic, staff reported their conversations, and hidden microphones were routinely discovered. Frustrated, Marjorie once told a Soviet operator to just listen in rather than keep cutting her calls. Despite the tension, she navigated Moscow society skillfully, forming a rare bond with Polina Molotova, wife of the Soviet Prime Minister, gaining diplomatic access even denied to the British. Amid the bleak Soviet landscape, Marjorie found solace in Russian imperial art. The Soviets, desperate for foreign currency, unknowingly sold Tsarist treasures at commission shops. She acquired rare icons, silver chalices, and Catherine the Great's porcelain, rescuing them from neglect. By early 1937, Joe had gained rare invitations to Soviet officials' private dachas and negotiated trade deals, while Marjorie used Hollywood film screenings at Spaso House to subtly showcase capitalism. But Soviet oppression wore on them. In April, they returned to the U.S., bringing gifts for FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt. Joe's glowing reports on Soviet industry impressed FDR, earning him a reassignment to Germany. Before assuming the post, they attended King George VI's coronation, where they mingled with aristocracy and met Winston Churchill, who questioned Joe about Stalin's purges and military capacity. By mid-1937, Stalin's brutality became undeniable. The executions of high-ranking officials and arrests of former dinner guests underscored the terror. Yet Joe publicly defended Stalin, believing the purges targeted real conspiracies, a stance Marjorie did not challenge. While tensions escalated, they embarked on a Sea Cloud Baltic cruise, gathering intelligence on European politics. Joe reported that Britain and France distrusted the USSR and preferred appeasement over alliance. However, their travels drew criticism, with the U.S. press accusing Joe of exploiting his ambassadorship for luxury. The backlash cost him the Berlin posting, relegating him to Belgium instead. Returning to Moscow in early 1938, Joe attempted to gather intelligence on Japan, but failed. Meanwhile, the brutal Bukharin treason trials rattled them further, yet Joe still maintained Stalin was eliminating legitimate threats. As Hitler annexed Austria in March 1938, FDR extended Joe's post, recognizing the USSR's growing strategic importance. In June, Joe secured a rare private meeting with Stalin, who requested U.S. military aid but offered little in return. The meeting boosted Joe's credibility in Washington, but global tensions worsened. In July 1938, they relocated to Belgium, temporarily living aboard Sea Cloud while their residence was renovated. Marjorie enjoyed royal society while Joe monitored Germany, correctly predicting appeasement would embolden Hitler. His fears were confirmed when the 1938 Munich Agreement ceded Sudetenland to Germany. By March 1939, Hitler invaded Czechoslovakia, and Stalin's dismissal of Foreign Minister Litvinov signaled a shift toward Germany. In August, Stalin stunned the world by signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, secretly dividing Eastern Europe with Hitler. A week later, Germany invaded Poland and World War II began. As Germany invaded Poland, Marjorie and Joe, on leave in the U.S., quickly secured their valuables from Brussels, narrowly avoiding torpedo attacks. Realizing diplomacy was futile, Joe resigned as ambassador in late 1939 to advise FDR on war strategy, earning praise despite resentment from career diplomats. Now settled in Washington, D.C., they made Tregerin their home, transforming it into a center of political influence. As war engulfed Europe, Marjorie shifted from high society to humanitarian efforts. In 1940, she helped Grand Duchess Charlotte of Luxembourg secretly bring her children to the U.S., housing them at Hillwood and Toppridge, earning the Order of the House of Savoy. She became a top fundraiser for the American Red Cross and re-entered politics when Joe chaired FDR's third inaugural committee. When Hitler invaded the USSR in June 1941, Joe, America's foremost Soviet expert, pushed for aid. Initially reluctant, Marjorie emerged as a passionate advocate, warning that Nazi rule would reduce women to mere breeders. Joe reinforced their mission with Mission to Moscow, a best-selling book later adapted into a film that shaped public perception of the Soviet alliance. By 1942, Marjorie was Washington's premier hostess and a committed wartime supporter. She leased her yacht, Sea Cloud, to the Navy for $1 a year, declaring, "Since I have no son to give to the war, I will offer the Sea Cloud." Marjorie's wartime contributions extended beyond social circles. She supported Army-Navy relief, opened a free military canteen in Manhattan, and hosted Soviet dignitaries, including Andrei Gromyko and war hero Lyudmila Pavlichenko. Her commitment to Soviet-American relations positioned her as a key wartime diplomat, using her wealth and influence to serve the Allied cause. Marjorie played a key role in Russian war relief, raising funds and organizing cultural exchanges, including an American nursery furniture exhibit in Moscow. Overcoming her fear of public speaking, she delivered radio appeals to rally support. As tensions grew over Allied delays in opening a second front, Joe hosted an American-Soviet Friendship Congress at Tregerin, attended by Vice President Henry Wallace. In 1943, Joe, too ill for a full ambassadorship, embarked on a diplomatic mission, personally delivering a letter from FDR to Stalin. He met with Stalin for over 2 hours, reinforcing U.S.-Soviet cooperation and acknowledging Soviet territorial claims in Poland. Stalin, initially reluctant, agreed to a future meeting with FDR. However, Joe's declining health forced Marjorie to take him to Saratoga Springs for recovery. That same year, Mission to Moscow, a Hollywood adaptation of Joe's book, sparked controversy, celebrated in the Kremlin but condemned as Soviet propaganda in the U.S. Meanwhile, the Tehran Conference finally secured the long-awaited promise of a second front. As Jo withdrew from diplomacy, Marjorie redirected her focus to charity, turning social events into fundraisers and even christening the Liberty ship C.W. Post in 1944 to honor her father. After the war, Marjorie turned to family matters. She celebrated Dina's 1946 marriage to Stanley Rumbaugh Jr., hoping it would steer her away from acting, though she resented inviting E.F. Hutton to the wedding. She also pressured her granddaughter Marwie to settle down, but Marwie pursued swimming and a brief Hollywood career instead. In 1947, Sea Cloud was returned after its wartime service, and Marjorie restored it for a sentimental Caribbean voyage retracing her honeymoon with Jo. However, their marriage was unraveling. Jo grew controlling, clashed with her children, and became irrationally jealous. His political irrelevance further strained their relationship as President Truman distanced himself from his pro-Soviet views. By 1945, as Cold War tensions escalated, Jo attended the Potsdam Conference but was sidelined. His calls for U.S.-Soviet nuclear cooperation were dismissed as Stalin's aggression deepened the divide. By 1947, anti-communist sentiment surged, and Jo's credibility faded, with Churchill's Iron Curtain speech and George Kennan's long telegram cementing the U.S.-Soviet split. Once a prominent diplomat, Jo became politically obsolete. Marjorie, however, remained a force in society. She chaired the 1948 New Look Ball, raising $176,000 for Good Samaritan Hospital, and hosted the Duke and Duchess of Windsor aboard Sea Cloud. That year, she and Jo toured South America, meeting Dominican dictator Rafael Trujillo in a grand diplomatic spectacle. With her children grown, Marjorie shifted her focus to Washington. She sold her Fifth Avenue apartment and Long Island estate, using the proceeds to help establish Long Island University. In D.C., she became the city's premier hostess. Her meticulously planned garden parties at Tregoron were more coveted than White House events. Beyond socializing, she introduced square dancing to Washington's elite, making it a sensation among politicians and diplomats. Even reserved figures like Justice Tom Clark eagerly joined. As her marriage to Jo deteriorated, she found purpose in cultural philanthropy, rescuing the National Symphony Orchestra from financial ruin. In 1956, she launched Music for Young America, a national program providing free concerts for students. By the mid-1950s, Marjorie was no longer just a socialite. She was a cultural and philanthropic powerhouse, shaping Washington's elite with generosity and impeccable taste. By the early 1950s, Marjorie's marriage to Jo had deteriorated beyond repair. Once captivated by his charm and political stature, she now found him possessive and jealous. As his health declined and his influence faded, his erratic behavior pushed her away. The final betrayal came in 1954 when she discovered that Tregoron was solely in his name. Furious, she filed for divorce. A bitter legal battle followed over property and their prized Russian art collection. Though Jo retained Tregoron, Marjorie reclaimed what she considered hers, even removing furnishings and uprooting azaleas. Their divorce was finalized in March 1955, discreetly arranged while she met residency requirements in Sun Valley, Idaho. After 3 failed marriages, Marjorie reclaimed her identity, dropping her married name and purchasing Arbormont, which she transformed into Hillwood. Washington society was stunned by the divorce. Some mourned the end of a great love story, while others saw it as a strategic move. Time magazine quipped she was as well preserved as a frozen peach, but the Washington Evening Star hailed her as the most fabulous hostess in all America. Determined to leave a lasting mark, Marjorie spent 2 years perfecting Hillwood. She expanded the kitchen for grand entertaining, modernized utilities, and created luxurious spaces, including a party pavilion and film screening rooms. The gardens, featuring thousands of azaleas, rhododendrons, and a rose garden, were designed to perfection. She even repositioned library doors to frame the Washington Monument. By 1957, Hillwood stood as a masterpiece of European opulence and Russian grandeur. Its interiors showcased Fabergé treasures, imperial portraits, and gold-encrusted porcelain from the Tsarist court. Washington society was awestruck. Journalists likened it to the splendor of Tsarist Russia and Louis XV's France. At its grand debut, a lavish 4th of July celebration, dignitaries dined as fireworks lit up the sky. Within a year, Hillwood was legendary. Now fully independent, Marjorie embraced life on her own terms. Alice Roosevelt Longworth applauded her decision, joking she had returned to the post. Though insiders speculated about a fourth marriage, she made it clear her name would never change again. Hillwood was not just a home, it was the legacy she intended to leave behind. In 1955, the past resurfaced when her first husband, Ed Close, died suddenly. Though long divorced, she remained sentimental about their youthful romance. Rumors swirled that an elegant woman resembling Marjorie appeared briefly at his church before vanishing. When asked, she simply said, "In spirit." With diplomatic obligations behind her, she devoted herself to philanthropy, funding youth programs, the Boy Scouts, and symphony orchestras. In 1957, she received France's Chevalier of the Legion of Honor. For her 70th birthday, friends unveiled Friendship Walk, a secluded garden path at Hillwood with a marble plaque honoring her generous nature, love of beauty, and devotion to human needs. Deeply moved, she often retreated there to reflect on a life defined by elegance, philanthropy, and grace. By 1957, Marjorie found companionship with Pittsburgh businessman Herbert A. May. At 71, she believed she had finally found lasting love, marrying Herb in a quiet ceremony on June 18, 1958. Unlike her previous husbands, Herb was not her financial equal, but she valued companionship over wealth, assuring him, "Money is the least of our problems." Their marriage was celebrated with grand receptions, one at Rosewall in Pittsburgh, where Marjorie revitalized the estate, and another at Hillwood, featuring a ballet performance nearly ruined by rain. Despite the mishap, it reaffirmed her status as Washington's premier hostess. Determined to leave a lasting impact beyond society, Marjorie helped establish the Washington Ballet Guild, later founding the Washington National Ballet Foundation to focus on professional training. Overcommitted with philanthropy, she appointed Herb as chairman, trusting his business expertise to guide her vision. Herb introduced Marjorie to air travel, leading her to purchase a Vickers Viscount turboprop jet, Merriweather, outfitted as a flying living room. He also encouraged her to relax her strict views on alcohol, though she remained disciplined. She embraced Herb's children, particularly his adopted daughter Peggy, strengthening her lifelong belief in generosity and family bonds. Encouraged by Herb, she reconnected with Battle Creek, funding C.W. Post Stadium in 1961. She later invited 24 top students to Washington in 1963, personally guiding them on a 3-day tour of the capital. Marjorie ran her estates with military precision, ensuring staff loyalty and care. In 1962, her Palm Beach and Adirondack staff honored her with a dedicated flagpole at Hillwood. Despite her warmth, she maintained strict control over her household, with her social secretary, Margaret Voigt, managing invitations, even frustrating family members. By the early 1960s, Marjorie's worsening hearing loss made her increasingly reliant on Margaret, straining her marriage. Then, in 1963, she was confronted with photographic evidence of Herb's homosexuality, a secret long suspected but never confirmed. The images, taken at Mar-a-Lago's pool, arrived with a blackmail threat. When Eleanor broke the news, Marjorie admitted, "I guess I knew because he was acting so strange." Humiliated and deeply wounded, Marjorie initiated divorce proceedings in Mexico, finalizing the separation in August 1964. Despite the betrayal, she remained compassionate, ensuring Herb's medical care and securing a private apartment for him in Fort Lauderdale until his death in 1968. She also maintained close ties with his children, particularly Peggy, who remained in her life. Marjorie's fourth divorce left a lasting scar. Friends speculated why her marriages had failed. Some blamed her idealized view of C.W. Post, while others believed her power intimidated men. Journalist Roy Meacham noted that no husband had ever matched her sheer life force. At 76, she was done with marriage. Embracing life on her own terms, she reclaimed her identity as Marjorie Merriweather Post. Refusing to retreat, she published a biography of C.W. Post, resumed hosting at Topbridge, and by 1964 returned to grand gatherings. She reemerged in Washington's elite circles, attending the National Ballet's opening night and reviving signature events like the Daiquiri Ball. In 1966, she vowed never to miss another season at Mar-a-Lago, reinvigorating Palm Beach's social scene. Rumors swirled about suitors. First was Colonel Serge Obolensky, a Russian aristocrat, though their bond remained platonic. Then came Fred Korth, former Secretary of the Navy, 20 years her junior. By 1966, he became her constant companion, traveling with her between Hillwood, Topbridge, and Mar-a-Lago. Though many expected a wedding, her daughters opposed the match, urging her to live with him instead. Outraged, she refused, but Fred hesitated as well, concerned about their age gap. They remained devoted companions without marriage, and he stayed by her side until the very end. Determined to preserve her legacy, Marjorie worked with top art specialists to refine Hillwood's collection, securing its status as the premier American museum of Imperial Russian artifacts. In 1962, she gifted Hillwood to the Smithsonian with a $7 million endowment, cementing her legacy as a great collector and philanthropist. She also sought to preserve Mar-a-Lago, offering it to Florida's state government, but officials declined due to its costly upkeep. Despite longing for privacy, Marjorie remained a high-profile figure. Life magazine, 1965, described her as a Dresden doll woven of steel wire, capturing her blend of delicacy and strength. By 1967, the New York Times and Time magazine hailed her as the Grand Dame of High Society, solidifying her legendary status. Her 80th birthday in 1967 was a spectacular affair. At Constitution Hall, her son-in-law, Leon Barzin, conducted the National Symphony Orchestra in her honor. The next day, 300 guests, including Madame Nehru and Supreme Court Justice Tom Clark, gathered at the Soulgrave Club to celebrate. In true Marjorie fashion, she donated her $5,000 birthday check to the symphony, proving her generosity never faded. Amid the political unrest of the late 1960s and 1970s, Marjorie remained dedicated to supporting Vietnam veterans. She hosted wounded soldiers from Walter Reed and Bethesda Naval Hospital at Hillwood, offering warmth and hospitality. Her generosity earned her the Dickie Chappelle Award in 1969 for her unwavering dedication to veterans' causes. As her hearing worsened, Marjorie became increasingly dependent on her social secretary, Margaret Voigt, frustrating her daughters. When she learned she had missed Eleanor Davies' wedding invitation due to Voigt's interference, she personally made amends, proving she still valued personal connections despite growing isolation. Refusing lip-reading lessons, she found ways to stay engaged, hearing better in small gatherings, and even dancing flawlessly by feeling vibrations through the floor. Though not overly affectionate, Marjorie remained deeply involved in her grandchildren's lives. She ensured their security, arranged thoughtful heirlooms, and attended key milestones. When her grandson Tony de Bacchisi married in Paris, she flew in last minute from Capri, then hosted the newlyweds on a Roman honeymoon aboard Merriweather. Her special bond with Dina's son David, who battled juvenile diabetes, was evident. She allowed him to spend a summer at Topbridge under one condition: he worked as a footman. Guests were shocked when she kissed a uniformed attendant, revealing him as her grandson in disguise. Even as she aged, Marjorie remained active in philanthropy, chairing events like the Red Cross Ball and the World Wildlife Fund benefit. However, her declining hearing took a visible toll. At a Mar-a-Lago reception, she quietly retreated, allowing a younger hostess to receive guests. Determined to secure Mar-a-Lago's future, Marjorie lobbied Congress to designate it as a presidential retreat. She personally charmed House Interior Committee members by hosting them at Mar-a-Lago, ensuring their support. In April 1968, she welcomed Lady Bird Johnson and National Park Service officials, showcasing the estate's architectural significance. By 1972, Mar-a-Lago was declared a National Historic Landmark, and in 1973, President Nixon authorized its transfer to the Department of the Interior. At the same time, Marjorie finalized Hillwood's transfer to the Smithsonian, an agreement ratified in January 1969, ensuring her vast collection of Russian treasures and European antiques would be permanently preserved. She celebrated with a dinner attended by Vice President Hubert Humphrey and Smithsonian officials. Director S. Dillon Ripley likened her generosity to Andrew Mellon, recalling their first meeting when she casually unveiled Marie Antoinette's earrings and a blue diamond necklace once owned by Empress Eugenie. Even in her final years, Marjorie remained dedicated to her legacy, philanthropy, and the preservation of beauty. Marjorie worked to ensure Hillwood's integrity, prohibiting food service inside and establishing the Marjorie Merriweather Post Foundation to reclaim the estate if the Smithsonian failed to honor her wishes. Securing Mar-a-Lago's future proved more difficult. Though efforts to designate it as a winter White House progressed, no final agreement was reached. She also altered her plans for Camp Topridge, donating it to New York State as an educational retreat instead of C.W. Post College. Despite declining health, Marjorie remained a glamorous presence in Palm Beach and Washington. At 83, she stunned guests at Mar-a-Lago, leading a square dance in a peasant blouse, red petticoat, and pearls. By 1971, hosting guests became exhausting. That summer, she suffered a series of strokes, growing frail and forgetful. Undeterred, she planned a Christmas cruise but fell dangerously ill mid-voyage, forcing an early return on Merriweather. Turning 85 in March 1972, Marjorie celebrated quietly at Mar-a-Lago with close family and friends. Though urged to slow down, she insisted on returning to Hillwood for her annual spring garden parties, though they became harder to manage. At one event, she unknowingly hosted New York's most famous call girl, invited by an oblivious guest. With her hearing nearly gone and frailty increasing, socializing became difficult. Too weak to appear at gatherings, her bed was wheeled to a window so she could wave to guests, a poignant farewell to the world she once ruled. That summer, she made her final journey to Hillwood. Greeted by her loyal butler, Gus, she smiled and said, "Gus, I'm home." Though she briefly regained strength, her condition rapidly declined. She stopped eating, failed to recognize visitors, and remained firm in her standards. When her grandson-in-law drank beer from a can, she slapped his hand, insisting on a glass. On September 10, 1973, she regained clarity long enough to tell Adelaide, "You've always been a comfort to me." These were her final words. She lapsed into a coma and passed away at Hillwood on September 12, 1973 at 5:30 a.m., marking the end of an era. On September 17, 1973, 1,200 mourners gathered at National Presbyterian Church to honor Marjorie, including Mamie Eisenhower, ambassadors, and dignitaries. The National Symphony Orchestra, led by Leon Barzin, performed Mozart, Berlioz, and Tchaikovsky. Actor Cliff Robertson delivered a eulogy, later entered into the Congressional Record, celebrating her as a patriot, philanthropist, and visionary. That afternoon, a private Christian Science service was held at Hillwood. Her 50-page will revealed a $117 million estate, with her 3 daughters as primary beneficiaries. To preserve her legacy, Hillwood and Mar-a-Lago were placed in trusts. Loyal employees received generous bequests, while major donations supported the National Symphony Orchestra, the Red Cross, and Mount Vernon College. A year later, in a rain-soaked ceremony, her ashes were interred in Hillwood's Rose Garden. As mourners huddled under umbrellas, Eleanor quipped, "Mother would have been amused at our umbrellas." Despite congressional approval, Mar-a-Lago was never designated a winter White House. By 1975, security officials deemed it unsuitable due to its location near a flight path. Facing $1 million in annual upkeep, the Post Foundation returned it to the government in 1980. In 1985, Donald Trump purchased it for $10 million, later transforming it into a private club. Hillwood faced similar challenges. The Smithsonian, reluctant due to Marjorie's strict conditions, such as banning food service, returned it to the Post Foundation in 1976. Today, the Hillwood Museum stands as a premier institution, preserving her unparalleled collection of Russian and French treasures. Tributes poured in, praising Marjorie's business acumen, philanthropy, and regal presence. The Washington Star-News recognized her strategic generosity, ensuring her wealth was put to good use. The New York Times described her as a woman whose grandeur rivaled royalty. Yet Marjorie's true legacy was not just her fortune, but how she used it. From World War I hospitals and soup kitchens to Soviet war relief, Boy Scout camps, and music scholarships, her philanthropy touched countless lives. 9 years before her death, she reflected on her father's belief that life is a spiritual progression, measured by what one learns and accomplishes. By that measure, Marjorie Merriweather Post had not just amassed wealth, she had created an enduring legacy of beauty, generosity, and impact that would have made her father proud. So what did you think of the glamorous life of Marjorie Merriweather Post? And what about Mar-a-Lago? Once her dream of a presidential retreat, it now belongs to President Donald Trump. Does its modern role add to her legacy? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, keep seeking the stories that move your soul.